Hello, friends. Well, today, as you can see, I've changed the virtual background, so I'm joining you from the beach. Um, I know it looks rather windy, but I don't think you're going to hear any wind in this video. Good. So let me share the screen for uh, Ernest Sato's diary for Peking from the 25th of March to 24th of August, 1862. This is carrying on from his time in Shanghai, I which diary I read recently. Okay, so let's get straight into it. Tuesday, the 25th March, left Shanghai 6 a.m. in the Ringdove. That would be one of the Navy's ships, HMS, the Royal Navy, HMS Ringdove. 4, Captain Craigie, Lieutenants Liardet and Arundel, Master Hayden, First Engineer Shearman, Surgeon Greaves of the Coromandel. I think 4 is probably the number of guns it had. Normally mention that. Friday, the 28th of March, anchored off Shantung Promontory as the wind, which was blowing a dust storm, was too strong. This storm, we learnt afterwards, had been very severe at Tientsin and Taku. Saturday, 29th March, stopped at Chefu to send letters to the Insolent, a small gunboat. There ran across to Yantai, where the consulate is. Sunday, 30th of March, went on shore and walked about in the market. We went also into a silk shop where silk was sold at $3 per piece of 20 yards. 2 or 3 merchants reside there, and the French consul is agent for a lot of firms in Shanghai. The exports are pulse, bean cake, silk, and vegetables. Food of all kinds is cheap. 6 hares for $1, 8 fowls $1, 300 eggs $1, 9 pintail grouse $1, walnuts tin a penny, pears not good, 120 for $1, ground nuts plenty, beef 7 cents per pound, 180 bread cakes as large as a penny bun for $1, 4 tame or wild geese $1. Monday, 31st of March, started at 6 a.m. and reached Odin Cove in Ta Lien Wan Bay at 4:30 p.m. Stopped an hour to land the mail. Last war in this bay were 80 vessels of war and 150 transports. Not sure I follow that. New Chuang is 160 miles from here, and the mail is conveyed overland. The country is very hilly and covered with trees. Tuesday, April the 1st, anchored about 18 miles off the Peiho forts, 4 p.m. Wednesday, April the 2nd, weather thick and wind right ahead, obliged to get up steam and creep up to the anchorage, which was done by dinner time. Thursday, April the 3rd, started for the shore at 8:30 and performed the trip in the ship's cutter in 3 hours by rowing and sailing. The whole distance could not have been more than 10 miles. My luggage went on shore in the pilot's boat. After seeing that I was all right at the hotel, was introduced to Gibson, vice consul. Okay, and here are the footnotes. So let's see. Shandong Peninsula, Tientsin is Tianjin, Taku is Dagu in Pinyin, Chefu is Jifu in Pinyin. It was the name Westerners gave to Yantai, the city near the end of the Shandong Peninsula. To the Chinese, it only referred to Jifu Island, which was governed by Yantai. It was the site of the Protestant collegiate school which educated children of foreign missionaries, business people, and diplomats in China. 10 a penny, in other words, very cheap. In Pinyin, Dalian, that would be Dairen in Japanese, sister city of Kee-tah-kew-shoo. In Pinyin, New Chuang is what was written, I think. It's known to the Chinese as Yingkou. It was one of the treaty ports opened under the treaties of Tianjin of 1858, but after the treaty had been signed, the British discovered that the river nearby was too shallow for their ships. Therefore, the treaty port was moved to an area nearer to the river mouth, which they still called New Chuang. This is where the modern-day Yingkou is located. The Peiho in Pinyin Bahe forts were also known as the Taku or Dagu forts. They were located at the Peiho, now called the Hai River estuary, about 60 kilometers southeast of Tientsin. And then John Gibson, Taku had strong claims to being China's dreariest consular post. according to P.D. Coates in the China Consuls, page 283. In Diplomat, that's Diplomat in Japan, Sato tells on page 20 the sad tale of what happened to Gibson after he was transferred to a position in Formosa or Taiwan. He got into difficulties with the Chinese officials there and called on the commander of a gunboat to bombard the custom house. He was sharply remanded for this by the Foreign Office and shortly died thereafter, it was said, of a broken heart. Okay, so let's go back. And so after seeing that I was all right at the hotel, was introduced to Gibson, vice consul at Taku, after Tiffin walked over the south fort. Viewed from the sea, it shows one tier of guns with 3 cavaliers, one at each end and one in the middle, on which were mounted large guns. One of the cavaliers is now being levelled for a billiard table to be placed upon it. Shared a hut with a fellow of the 31st. The windows were paper, the walls mud whitewashed. The same in the mess room, where the chains are so narrow from back to front that it was impossible to lean back without tumbling over. I think that surely must be chairs, not chains. Friday, April the 4th, started for Taku in 2 carts drawn by a couple of mules, one of which was between the shafts and the other attached by 2 side copes about 1 length and a half in front. It's quite tricky to read some of these diary entries, so I'm not surprised that there are occasional errors. Okay, from a drawing, or rather woodcut on a fan. This is a cart drawn by mules. The cart was 2-wheeled and without springs. The road was very dusty and hot. I was obliged to tie up my nose in my pocket handkerchief and to shut my eyes to prevent being choked and blinded. We got on at 4 to 5 miles per hour and reached the halfway house at 2:30 p.m., where I eat half a fowl and some of the dough cake called ping. It was rather like pancakes, and so I found it best to eat sugar along with them. At 3, I started again in company with a soldier going up from Taku on leave who had overtaken and passed me. The drivers now began to get excited by emulation of each other and by the promise of a quarter on arrival at Tientsin, and lashed the mules into a gallop, the consequence of which was that in rounding a corner, one of my carts with luggage alone in it was upset. No damage was sustained beyond a slight bending of the head of my iron bedstead and the loss of 15 minutes. We arrived at Tientsin at 6:30, and I had much difficulty in finding the consulate. What's number 10? Let's see. Cavalier, yes, is a raised work which allows control of a neighboring area. And 11, in pinyin bing, various types of flatbread from northern China with flaky pastry and sweet or savory fillings. Carrying on with the diary. Luckily, I met ACG Thompson coming out of the club, who took me up to his quarters next to the consulate and then sent me back to meet Mongan, coming from his place in the city. I fell in with Mongan and Douglas a short way off and returned with them, directing my luggage to their house. After dinner, went to the theatre, where I saw a piece called The First Night of an Actress' Appearance. It was acted very well by soldiers. The scenes and drop scenes were also very good, and the theatre nicely arranged. Saturday, April the 5th, took breakfast at the 67th Mess. That would be the 67th Regiment, I think. Afterwards, called on Lindsay and Company's agent and opened an account for several things I wanted. Walked into the city. In the middle is a great arch branching into 4 at right angles, whence proceed streets leading to the 4 gates. Near here, I saw a lot of Chinese being drilled by English non-commissioned officers with a view to their being sent against the Taipings. They really drilled very well. I went out at the north gate and walked round to the consulate, which at present is near the east gate, through the best Chinese street I have yet seen. Fur and curio shops of the finest tiffin at the consulate mess. Afterwards walked out with DACG Ewing, a very nice fellow. We got onto the wall at the north gate and walked round to the south. It is in good repair generally, but in some places the brickwork has tumbled down. The corner towers are also very dilapidated. The city lieth 4 square, the north and south sides being about a mile, the other 2 a little less in length. From the south gate, walked to Treaty Joss House about 1 mile from the city. It is in at present a dusty plain, but in summer that will be green with millet. Just beyond is an entrenchment which runs all round the city at some distance and is of no use whatsoever. At Douglas Quarters found my brass basin all right. As it came on to rain, chairs were ordered with 4 bearers who contrived to carry us just half as fast as 2 Hong Kong coolies could have done. Ewing, Mongan, Douglas and I dined alone and consumed so much champagne that nothing else was drunk by anyone. We sat talking till nearly 10 and then went to the billiard room where Douglas beat me in 2 games. After the first game, Ross, Surgeon and young Pollard of the 67th, the latter exactly resembles Theodore, that's a younger brother of Ernest, in the extent of his intellect. He was very screwed and talked all sorts of bosh. That was mentioned in Sir David Warren's introduction. Next day, of course, he declared that he had been as sober as a judge the night before. We splashed into a good lot of puddles going home, although the rain had not lasted long. The East Gate was quite flooded, night very cold. Sunday, April 6, started this morning in a boat for Tung Chau, the hold about 24 feet long, in the centre a wooden house with a paper window at one end and doors at both. Half of the house is occupied by a raised platform 2 feet high, 6 long, 3 broad, on which he sleeps and takes his meals, and underneath which are... Okay, so here are the footnotes. J.H. Thompson, Assistant Commissioner General in Tientsin. James Mongan, British Consul in Tientsin. Robert Kenway Douglas, an assistant of the British Consulate in Tientsin. He went on to become the first keeper of the British Museum's Department of Oriental Printed Books and Manuscripts. A. Ewing, Deputy Assistant Commissioner General, Tientsin. Theodore Sato, a younger brother of Ernest. And in Pinyin, Tongzhou, it is 12 miles to the southeast of central Peking. That's Tung Chau in this, or Tung Chau, here in this diary. Okay, so carrying on, next page, is written above R. Some of this baggage, boxes, is written above baggage. In the lower part, he can almost stand upright. He took provisions for 24 days, 6 bottles of ale, 2 small but plump fowls, a round of roast beef, nearly all of which he gave to the crew, 3 1-pound loaves, a quarter pound of cheese, half a pound of butter, and a pinch of salt. Furniture consisting of a brass basin, 4 blankets, a rug, a sheet of waterproof, a pewter mug. 2 teacups bought at a village for 7.5 pence, a knife and fork, 2 willow pattern plates. Used the boatman's teapot and got hot water at the stopping places for a cash. That's a very low value coin, isn't it? Maybe a cent. Besides this, he reveled freely in Chinese cakes and one day in pears. Started at 11 a.m. and anchored for the night at 7:30 p.m. Walked a good deal of the way, much too fast for the boat to keep up with me, as it was only being towed by one man and pushed along by the other. Fine sky, but very cold wind. The country very flat, with plenty of mud villages along the banks. Some arbores vitae and other smaller trees not yet in leaf, millet just making its appearance out of the ground. The hire of the boat was $1 per day. Monday, April 7th. Started again at daylight, got up and walked along the bank from 7 till 8, going into the villages and trying the chow chow. Could not pick up anything so good as I did yesterday. That was really good pastry. Breakfasted at 8, then read the Newcomes, walked a good deal, stopped at a place called Tung Yung to buy a teapot for 5 pence. Bought some cakes which tasted very strongly of earth nuts and also some plum cake. Off these I had tiffin. A great part of the day we had the sail up and went along faster than I could walk. Without sail, the speed was about 3 miles per hour. Walked again in the afternoon and got into the wake of 5 boats carrying tobacco or opium to Peking. The old man is the owner of the boat, aged 30, and the boy who tows 20. The vessel cost $80, rather a large price for such a badly built affair. I give him $1 every day. Smashed the fork in trying to open the beer bottle. Drew 1 cork with my teeth, but all the rest were rotten. Got a typing cash from the old fellow. Stopped by the bank at 7 p.m. at a place where there were no houses. Nevertheless, I got hot water from the old man. The villagers think it very funny to call out Wailu or dollar or how mushi as one passes, as German cads do roast beef. The cakes mentioned were not very palatable, so I gave a lot away to the boy, to whom I gave also a huge lump of beef, which he seemed to find very good. Tuesday, April 8th. Went a little way this morning, got up at 8 and found that the men had stopped on account of a dust storm. I tried to make them go on, but could could only get for an answer Feng Pu Hao. So we waited till 1 o'clock. I got out and went to a village, but could not get any food. A man brought some earth nut cakes to the side, but I did not like them. Another had raw flesh to sell, but I did not want that. Went on till about 3 o'clock and then stopped for the night on account of. We've got the footnotes here. In Pinyin, guilo is an insulting word for a Westerner. How mushy is how much, yeah. Actually, it was and is French cads who call the British roast beef. Yes, indeed. In Pinyin, Feng Bu Hao, which literally means wind no good. Went on till about 3 o'clock and then stopped for the night on account of the violence of the wind. The dust poured through the crevices and lay at least 1/4 of an inch thick on the floor. How much sank into my bedclothes, I don't know. I had only to beat them and a cloud rose up. Under the circumstances, all I had left to do was to read the Newcombes and go to sleep. In the evening, I went to bed at 8 o'clock and blew out my candle at 9. I shall be a long time getting to Peking at this rate. I found the men sleeping in a space not quite so big as my kang. Wednesday, April 9th. Got up early and walked 1.25 hours on the bank in the vain attempt to buy some bread, as what I had would only suffice for breakfast. About 10 o'clock we halted as a dust storm came on. Fancy all the country, as far as one sitting on the top of the church tower could see, turned into a dry, barren plain covered with dust to the depth of at least 2 inches. Then suppose the strongest March wind you ever knew to come and stir this up. You can imagine how this dust would pour down the chimney, creep under the door, tear and rend through the cracked window frames. How much worse was my condition seated in a house in my boat, where the planks are often half an inch or more apart. I was covered with dust from head to foot. Dust got into my eyes, nose, and ears, and dried up the moisture of my skin. I did not dare to open my meat, lest it should be made unfit to eat. The boatman made me some cakes, like the heaviest crust that ever a cook's apprentice failed in making. I endeavored to keep them warm and clean by placing them in 2 plates between the blankets, but the heat passed off and the dust penetrated. I could not read, for when I made the attempt, I was presently blinded and choked, while my book was in a fair way to be spoiled. So the only thing left was to lie with my head in a handkerchief and my hands in my pockets and sing, whistle, or go to sleep. We stopped at anchor till 6:30, 8.5 hours of the most miserable I have ever passed, as far as outward circumstances go. Turned in at 8, read PL till 9, and then went to sleep till 5 next morning. A very respectable nap for such a hard couch as mine was. Thursday, April 10th. Got out of my boat at 7. The morning was lovely, a blue sky overhead, blue water beneath, and blue mountains in the distance. After all, Linnell's blues are hardly exaggerated. The wind was good and carried us on in fine style. I tried the yellow cakes called wo to or yin miang and found them very good when hot. Finished my butter and cheese and gave away my tea to the boatmen, who evidently had none of their own. Walked a good deal on the banks. In the afternoon, I came to a place where man to, or boiled bread, was to be had, and I found it not at all bad. Samshu is beastly stuff, 4 cash for a wineglassful, underneath wrote 2. The Chinese goodies look and taste just like ours, and as I fully proved. I made a lot of Chinamen happy with tobacco at 3 cash a packet. The mirage was prominent today. It is caused by the heat of the sun reflected from the soil and is of the same nature as the flickering scene. So a kang is a bed stove. John Linnell, the English landscape painter. These are the footnotes. In Pinyin, woto is a kind of steamed cornbread from northeast China. In Pinyin, manto, a kind of bun, and sanshao, a very strong liquor, somewhat similar to the Japanese shochu. So the flickering scene over gas lamps. So, next page. You may see it in England on the seashore or in the fields on a very hot day, but not, I think, to such an extent as to look like water. I fancy I should not be deceived by it. Saw flocks of rooks and magpies and also plenty of wild duck or birds of that sort who are hao chow chow, as the head boatman says. Chinese food is so cheap that I could live on it without meat for about $1 per month. 4 cakes, not bad in taste, cost 1 penny, and they will serve for the whole of 2 meals. Of the lighter and more fanciful cakes, 3 pennies worth would last a day. Drinking tea would cost about 250 cash a month, or not so much, so that $2 would cover the whole. I don't know how meat is sold. All the people in the villages I pass are very inquisitive, the women and children frightened. I came into a public space where a man was playing on a gong and another on the cymbals. Nearly everyone ran away. The dogs barked at me, and the old men with stern looks bade me be off. So I left the inhospitable place and shook the dust off my boots. At another place was a temple of Confucius, a mere brick hut about 6 foot by 8. Along the long side was a kang, a stove, and on it a stone stool. On the walls were pasted coloured prints, and everything was covered with dust. Friday, April 11th. Arrived at Tungchou at 1:30 p.m. and got 2 carts drawn by a donkey each. Each cart was $1. The distance to the gates of Peking is 40 li, and this we were 3.5 hours in accomplishing. The road was very dusty, running in hollows, which seemed at some remote period to have been filled with water. A stone causeway also runs between the two cities, formed of huge flags, but it was too rough to ride upon, being worn into deep ruts, almost large enough to swallow up cart and all. When I arrived at the legation, it was dark and I was hungry. I found Milne and Jones sitting together, the latter of whom immediately disappeared. After dinner, the old boy showed me my quarters, at present apart from the rest. I shall move to a house of the same sort as the other fellows have in about a month. Went to bed at 10 but could not sleep. At last I dropped off and mingled all the fellows together in my dreams. Saturday, April 12th. Breakfasted with Bruce, who is a fine, tall old fellow with a noble forehead and brown eyes. His age is about 50. His grey beard, whiskers, and moustache make him look older than perhaps he is. St. John, an attaché. Dr. Rennie, a military surgeon, and Colonel Neil were also present. The latter starts this day for Japan in order to take Alcock's place. So we have an allusion to the Bible, Matthew. A li was not precisely defined, but was around 600 meters. Japanese ri, I think, is cognate at least. Reverend William Milne, Assistant Chinese Secretary at the British Legation, in charge of the student interpreters. He had been a missionary and was fluent in Mandarin. E.D. Jones, a student interpreter. Frederick Bruce was the equivalent of British ambassador to China. His title was Envoy Extraordinary, Minister Plenipotentiary, and Chief Superintendent of British Trade in China. F.R. St. John, first attaché at the British Legation. Edward St. John Neil was Secretary of the British Legation in Peking, and as Sato says, was leaving for Japan. He would be British Chargé d'Affaires there for 2 years while Rutherford Alcock was on leave. So he was in charge when the Namamugi incident occurred in September 1862. Thomas Francis Wade, who devised an early system of transliterating Chinese into the Roman alphabet, his system was modified by Herbert Giles and became known as the Wade-Giles system. Okay, Wade takes the duties of Chinese Secretary and Secretary of Legation both. I was introduced to him and he asked me a good deal with a view to finding out whether I have any particular talent for languages. It did not seem that I made a very favourable impression. Bruce's house is very fine with gilding and paint. It was the palace of the Duke Liang and is very extensive. Our quarters are rather humble and hardly large enough. We ought to have each 2 rooms. We have a 5's court, a pistol range, and a small gymnasium, but the chief amusement is riding, and I shall go in for a horse if I can get it cheap enough. Sunday, April 13th. Jameson arrived today, though he came up by the mail after I did, thus being only 2 days behind me. Jameson had been recalled from Japan to learn Chinese, as was stated in the previous diary entry. At 11 o'clock, prayers are read by Milne, 2 of the fellows giving the lessons. After tiffin, went out through the bazaars to Curio Street with Allen and Gardner. Nothing was bought, as prices were too high. In the evening, dissenting prayers at Dr. Lockhart's, at which there was a large assembly of students and soldiers. Afterwards, tea and toast for us. I presented my letter of introduction. His appearance was very pleasing, but he may turn out different. Discovered the gymnasium today. It has only and horizontal bars, which are good. Learnt something about cash from Gardner, and we exhibited our mutual collections. Order a pair of yellow commissariat boots for riding. Monday, April 14th. Wasted the morning in what is technically called knocking about. After tiffin, a man came with curios, and I bought a snuff bottle for 6pence and a cash. Afterwards went with Gardner through the central gate down Picture Street, where I bought a map of the world and a map of Peking. The pictures were not particularly good. By the south gate of the Chinese city are the temples of heaven and of agriculture. Into the enclosure of one of these we got, but were immediately ordered out. According to Gardner's interpretation of what the gatekeeper said, in 4 days we might come again, when some great, here are the footnotes, from 39 to 46. So the palace was originally an imperial residence given by Emperor Kangxi to one of his 33 sons. Fives is a game in which a ball is hit against a wall with a hand. Allen and Gardner were student interpreters. Dr. William Lockhart was a missionary with the London Missionary Society. He was married to Sir Harry Parkes' sister Catherine, who was the first Western woman to step foot in Shanghai. And the outer city was known in English as the Chinese city. It was to the south of the inner city, Neicheng, so Weicheng and Neicheng. Neicheng, known as the Tartar city, which formed almost an exact square. The foreign legations were in the south of this city. Both cities were surrounded with walls. The inner city had 9 gates and the outer 6. The imperial city, Huangcheng, was enclosed by the Tartar city and itself had a wall and 4 gates. It in turn enclosed the complex of buildings that housed the emperor and his court. Satow described this as the imperial palace, but it is usually known in English as the Forbidden City, Zijincheng. The Temple of Heaven is a major complex of religious buildings in the outer city visited by the emperors to pray for a good harvest. Satow elsewhere calls it the altar to heaven, Tiantian, Tiantan and Tuntan. In Pinyin, it is Tiantan. It is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Xiannongtan was used by the emperors to perform sacrifices. That's the Temple of Agriculture. Okay. So according to Gardner's interpretation of what the gatekeeper said, in 4 days we might come again, when some great dignitary at present there had departed. Crossing over to the other, which was full of buildings, the gatekeeper saw us and bolted it, nor could we prevail upon him to open it. After dinner, played 3 games of chess with Stronach and was beaten. Tuesday, April 13th, walked out alone, went inside the Huang city and walked straight up as to the gate of the palace, but directly I stood under the lintel, everybody rushed from all sides to prevent my entrance, and I walked away again, followed by a whole lot of people, till I got out again into the Tartar city. Wednesday, April 16th. The Koreans, a dependent people paying tribute of large amount, have a legation here, and I have seen several of them about. They wear white clothes and full trousers, confined about 6 inches above the ankle. Their hats are black, shiny, and broad-brimmed, and made of horsehair. Behind the crown is a network of black horsehair which covers the forehead, and the head all round to an equal depth. The Chinese fasten whistles to the backs of their pigeons, and as these fly about, a peculiar shrill sound is produced. This day I walked on the wall with Milne, and had a good view of the city and mountains beyond. The imperial palace must be a splendid place. All the roofs are of glazed yellow tiles. The nobles' houses have generally bright green glazed tiles. Thursday, April 17th. Thursday, took out Innocent's horse to try him, and found him rather short-winded and lame. He stumbles frequently with the off forefoot, yes. Alan and I were out together from 4 to 6:30, and of course dinner was over and the soup cold when we returned. The day before, Innocent had taken his horse out to Yuanming Wen, but besides that, his wife with 2 infants, one of them at the breast and another woman. The consequence of their going so far was that they were nearly shut out and did not reach the legation till 9. I heard all this at Lockhart's, where I had gone to inquire about the horse. Lockhart gave him a most awful blowing up, and the poor fool was quite abashed and ashamed of himself. Friday, April 18th. My teacher came to me for the first time. He is a quiet man, 27 years of age, and pockmarked. Tasted a fruit today very much like a stoneless date, only not quite so luscious. It is black with a white dust, and about the shape and size of a fig. Wrote a letter to T. Hurst Smith, went to Lockhart's and returned him his Athenaeums, told Innocent that his horse stumbled too much to suit me. Brown, etc., tried a horse of Bruce's, which is for sale, but it proved restive and tried to throw us both off. Besides that, it is an ugly brute with a hollow back, so that won't suit. I spoke to St. John, and he promised to ask Bourrier at the French legation whether he has a beast for sale. Saturday, April 19th, went to see the observatory on the east wall, where our armillary, and here are the footnotes. W. Stronach was another student interpreter in Pinyin, Huang's city, the imperial city. Reverend J. Innocent, a missionary in Tianjin. The old summer palace, Yuan Min Yuan, it had been destroyed in 1860 by British and French troops during the Second Opium War. The Athenaeum was a well-known literary magazine, and J. Brown was a student interpreter in Peking. So, Saturday, April 19th, went to see the observatory on the east wall where our armillary spheres, eclipse hydra, celestial sphere, 6 feet in diameter, and other instruments which I could not understand. They are all wrought of bronze and supported by bronze dragons and so forth. Exposed to the open air for more than 200 years, they have suffered no damage beyond the loss of the clamp screws. Played whist in Gardner's room and found it very slow. Alan beat me again at chess. Sunday, April 20th, to the Roman Catholic Church to see High Mass performed, as it was Easter Day. When we got in and had taken our seats just outside the altar rails, we had leisure to admire the noise of chanting proceeding from the mouths of several thousand Chinese. After a while, this ceased, and the choir ascended into the gallery at the south end and began to chant the service to the accompaniment of a harmonium. Several of the priests and the bishop are Frenchmen, but they have adopted Chinese manners and sworn never to return again to their native country. One of the native priests has been educated in Rome and is said to speak Italian and French. The number of Roman Catholics is 60,000, and the religion is recognized by the state. All the boys and coolies at the legation are of this faith. Alan Gardner and I went after the service to a fruit shop in the Chinese city near the, what's that, Seijomon in Japanese. It'll be a different reading in Chinese. And eat as many grapes and pears as we could, besides bringing 16 of the latter away for 4 tiaos, 200 cash, which doubtless was at least twice as much as we need have paid, to Dr. Lockhart's assembly in the evening. 21st of April, Monday, walked up to the gate west of the Qianmun and loafed about, bought a dried persimmon, which tasted very much like a dried preserved orange. Sat for about 20 minutes on the top of the Qianmun, watching the Chinese city and the kites. It would make a splendid photograph, that beggar's bridge, of course taken instantaneously. As I came back by the feather shops, I stopped to talk to a man who was selling betel and cardamoms. Turning from him to go on, suddenly a Korean swell took off my hat to look at, and I in return took off his. Inside of it was another horsehair cap. I thought of exchanging, and we'll try to do so next time. One of them said the value was 5 taels. Tuesday, April 22nd, a pony was brought this morning to sell, and I and Jameson both tried it. It was a beautiful creature, colour brown, not very old, that is. The hollows over the eyes were not very deep. Stands about 13 hands. The seller asked 35 taels. I told him to bring the horse in the afternoon. He did so, but I did not expect it so early. I therefore had no trial of it with English saddle. And here are the footnotes for this page, 29. Armillary spheres were models of the night sky, consisting of a spherical framework of rings that were centered on the earth. They were well developed in China, having been used for centuries by astronomers there to study the stars. A clepsydra is a water clock. The gate, the Zhengyangmen, was Peking's principal gate and guarded the southern entry to the inner city. It still stands at the southern end of Tiananmen Square, although it has been damaged and rebuilt since SATOW'S day. It was colloquially known as the Qianmen, or Xianmen, or front gate, and Satow usually refers to it as Qianmun or Qianmen. It was very close to the legations, and he often went there. Okay, and then cardamoms. On a Chinese saddle and with a tucky bridle, I had no command over the pony, that is. I played fives. Wednesday, April 23rd. The weather is now getting very hot, so that it is impossible to walk before 4 o'clock with comfort. Expected the pony and sent the groom out after it, but it had gone too far to come back today. Fives again. Framed both the pictures I bought at Hong Kong at an expense of about 3 shillings. Saw a very pretty little spaniel bitch, which I bought for $3, far too much, as it was what the seller asked. Tried to explain to my servant the process of daguerreotyping. He said he understood, but I doubt whether he went any farther than the literal meaning of my words, for I forgot to explain that the sun's rays were reflected from the subject. Thursday, April 24th, dust storm, very bad, and therefore did not go out. After I went down to the stables to inspect a grey horse, just come up from Tientsin for sale. One of the soldiers informed me that the price at which he was sold was $20 and that I might offer the coolie who had him $25. Friday, April 25th, took another look at the horse. Having heard that Jameson wanted to give $25, someone told me that the keep of the animal had cost $5. So after trying him both inside and outside the legation in the canal, I made an offer of $30. At first the owner would not hear of it, but after leading the horse round the courtyard once or twice, he reduced his price to $35 from $40, which he asked at first. We then walked away, and afterwards the man's brother came and said he would take $32, but we would have nothing to do with it till he offered to take $30, at which I closed, though feeling rather sorry that I had not offered less at first, for I might have got it at $25. But then Jameson had offered that, and if the man would sell at that, it must have been his. The Tarkta pony I was looking after came back, but being discovered to have a large sore place about 1.5 inches square on his back, he was treated with the greatest contempt. The same price was asked for the pony as for the horse. In the afternoon, I went out for a ride in company of Brown, Thompson, Allen, Gardner, and Jameson on Jones's horse. We went out at the Hatamun and then galloped as hard as we could go to the corner of the east walls. My beast went very well, but I could hardly stop him. The road was very bad, and I expected a fall every moment. The dust kicked up by Thompson and Brown, who were before me, was so great that I had no idea where we were going to, and the horse dashed over a stone bridge before I could stop him. We there passed out at the northeast gate of the Chinese city and turned down by the wall. When we arrived at the stone bridge, the others dismounting to regulate the length of their stirrups, Gardner and I went on ahead a little way and missed them. We two then took our way along the South Chinese wall to the southwest gate, only diverging once to look at a temple. It was enclosed on our side by a high bank. We rode through a break in this and found, and then the footnotes, daguerreotyping is an early photographic process named after Louis Daguerre, the inventor. BT could be JJ and BT, another student interpreter, although later on he usually abbreviates BT to BE. He has not mentioned BT's name yet, so Brown seems more likely. GP Thompson, a student interpreter. The gate in Pinyin, Hatamen, popular name for the Chongwen men. It was demolished in the 1960s. So we rode through a break in the gate and found ourselves on a sort of lawn planted with the arbor vitae. The west side was open where the entrance was. Opposite the gate of the brick enclosure was a memorial tablet on a tortoise's back under a roof. This kind of monument is common enough. I saw several the day I came from Tungchou. We entered at the west gate of the south wall, my horse having trotted nearly the whole way from where we left the others, through the Lu Le Chang, a place formerly occupied by potteries and now by bookshops. Here Gardner and his pony fell into a hole which had been filled with sewerage. It was a black slimy mud, covered over with dust at the top, and I should have been led into it myself had I been first. The appearance of his pony was awful, as it was submerged entirely to its 4 legs. Gardner was pitched over its head and did not get very dirty, beyond what the animal splashed him with in its attempts to get up. His curses were quite frightful to hear. Having got a little paper from a shopman and wiped the mud off the saddle, he remounted and we rode off, but as he preceded me, I heard every now and then a curse proceeding from his lips as we went along. I found my horse very unwilling to go in front, which probably arises from the fact of his having been an artillery horse accustomed to follow. With the exception of that, I find no fault with him. In the evening, we held a meeting in Jameson's new quarters as a sort of housewarming and played whist for 5 cash points. I made 2 on the whole evening's play. Saturday, April 26th. Superintended the moving of my furniture up to the room where I am to remain the rest of my time on a level with the rest of the fellows. Got everything up by tiffin time, except some picture slips, which were yet to be bought. Jameson, Murray, Brown, and I went out to the picture street on the right of the Chien-mun Street, and here we furnished ourselves with 8 slip pictures and the 2 mounted maps for $3. Mine cost 6 chows and 30 cash for 4, but the subjects were only birds and flowers. Jameson's were rather more extensive, having a great number of figures in them. They are the best of the kind I have yet seen. Coming back through the bazaar, I paid $1 for wei chi-tse, which I had ordered the day before. In the evening, everyone came up to my room, and we had whist again and the same division of parties. Jones, Thompson, Allen, and I played together, and I again made 2 points at one time. Allen and I were 32 to the good, and then lost nearly all. The last table broke up at 1:30. Alan, Murray, Thompson, Jones, and I adjourned to Jones's room to eat biscuits and anchovy paste. I sat there till 2 a.m. and then went off to bed, and very glad I was too. There are 4 footnotes. In Pinyin, Liulichang, an area of Peking still famous for antiques. Elsewhere, Sato calls it Liulichang or LLC. Milne is a possibility for M, but he was their supervisor, so Murray, another student interpreter, seems more likely. In Pinyin, Wei-chi-ji, a set, or Wei-chi-zi, but I'm not quite sure. A set of the game is known as Go in English and Ego in Japanese. And Milne is again a possibility for M. All right. Sunday, April 27th, Alan and I went to the Russian legation to see if we could hear the Greek church service. A Russian who knew German addressed us in that language, and I interpreted. At first I was for saying ich, illegible, verstehen, but after walking about a little, I remembered. The result was that the pastor was out riding, and so there would be no service. I suppose illegible could be ich kann nicht verstehen. I can't understand. We then returned to get dollars and were joined by Gardner, and we 3 walked around the Yellow City to the Marble Bridge, which stretches over the lake running through the Imperial Pleasure Grounds. It was a lovely view, this long, shallow lake, with houses scattered along its edges and a hill with one of those odd llama monuments upon it. We passed between Prospect Hill and the palace, alongside of a moat where only Lockhart had been before. The gate we entered at was shut, but as no one opposed, Gardner opened it with a key. The second gate was open. It seemed as if we might easily have walked into the pleasure grounds. In the afternoon, I read John Halifax. In the evening, put my books up in my newly arrived shelves and went to Lockhart's. I gave Alan an IOU for $45 today, 25 of which were for the saddle I got from him. Monday, April 28th, rode out with Stronach up to the Anting Mun and round the enclosure of the Temple of Earth. Here we saw one of the huge stones for the late emperor's tomb. It seemed about 12 feet square and 6 high. 4 carts supported it, and the cables by which it was dragged must have been at least 10 inches thick. The vehicle had stopped and was prevented from slipping back by a bank of earth. All the beasts had gone off somewhere. Then across a flat plain north of the city, almost to the Lama Temple. Here we had a furious gallop, and my horse nearly rushed over into a wide hollow. Then we came through the Taeshongmen by the banks of the lake and through the imperial city. I like my horse better and better. He trots well and has a good, swift gallop, quite worth the $30. Tuesday, April 29th, Alan, Beatty, Gardner, and myself started today for Yuan Ming Yuan at about 10 o'clock. Gardner had the grub in his wallet, and while we were cantering in the imperial city, the loaves fell out and rolled on the ground, so he had to go without bread. We went up the street north of the north gate of the Huang city, past the bell and clock towers and through the Taeshinmun, and then took a northwest course for about 7.5 miles, which brought us to the bronze lions. These are in a sitting posture. The pedestals, also of bronze, are 6 feet high. There's footnotes. Yes, it looks like Sato was trying to write I don't understand in German, so ich kann nicht verstehen. An artificial hill in a park to the north of the Imperial Palace, in Chinese Jingshan. John Halifax, Gentleman, is a novel by Dinah Craik, first published in 1856. In Pinyin, Anding Men, a north gate in Peking city wall. It no longer stands. Ditan, a prominent temple in Peking. The Yongje Gong, also known as the Palace of Peace and Harmony Lama Temple. This vast temple is of the Giluk school of Tibetan Buddhism. In Pinyin, Deshengmen, the gate is still standing. Sato also spells it Teishen Shinmun and Teishengmen. J.J.M. Beatty, a student interpreter. There seems to be a mistake here. The Yuan Ming Yuan was the old summer palace, which had been destroyed in 1860. The place Sato goes on to describe is the summer palace, Yihui Wan. In Pinyin, Huang City, the imperial city. Deshengmen is note 76. I think if you are watching this on YouTube, you can scroll back to look at the places where these notes arise on the page. All right, so just the lions he's talking about, the bronze lions. These are in a sitting posture. The pedestals, also of bronze, are 6 feet high, and the lions about the same. One rests his left foot on a cub, the other his right on a network covered globe. Leaving this, we came on to a cement causeway, alongside of which is a large shallow lake covered with wildfowl, but remarkably free from grass or weeds. This on the west. On the east side, peachy and paddy fields. To the north of the lake is a hill closely planted with trees, on the top of which was the palace. One yellow tiled house still remains. A little lower on the face of the hill is a square windowless flat-roofed edifice, in front of which 2 staircases forming a rhomb, R-H-O-M-B, ascend. To the west of the lake is a high hill with a white pagoda on it, and a smaller hill with another. Midway on a causeway is a round brick wall filled with earth, on which are built all sorts of houses in a cluster. Access is gained to this by a bridge consisting of a single lofty oval arch, ascended and descended by steps, the balustrades of marble. South is an island with grottos and summer houses upon it, round which runs a paved walk with marble balustrade. Here Alan Gardner and I had a swim. The water did not come up to our necks, and the bottom was a loose, shifting sand, a foot deep. A marble bridge of 17 oval arches, not Gothic, gradually increasing and diminishing in height and span, connects this with the shore. Here we had our tiffin, the inquisitive natives not being allowed to cross over. Leaving this, we still journeyed along the causeway, with the stream on the left, crossed by a second oval-arched bridge. Coming as far as a place where there was a road overshadowed with trees and a walled village, we crossed, the water being only a foot deep. We then rode through the village, turned to the right, and went along a high ridge, trotting and cantering, where only one could go on the path. By this road we got close to the gate of the Pagoda Hill, but did not go in. Still continuing our road, we passed through a village where some people actually wanted payment for a cup of cold water, behind the palace, through a grove of trees, which we left in a gallop, and soon arrived at the Bronze Lions, whence we took the same road home. Coming back, we did not spare the horses, but galloped them even over the stone causeways. Still, they did not seem at all fatigued on arriving at the stables. April 30th of Wednesday, mail came in and brought no letters for me, which is strange. It is difficult to think that the governor would miss 2 mails running. That's his father, governor. The Chinese have a very foolish way of watering their streets. The idea of water carts has not yet entered into their heads. They put large buckets of water along the side of the road, and there a man with basin sprinkles the water all over it. With a basin, sorry. I should like to try and give them some notion of the way in which we do it in Britain, that is, I suppose. Gardner and I went to the Liu Le Chang to look after books. My inquiry was after, what's that? Da Ming Xuan Shu, literally the Great Ming calculation text, which elicited at one place 2 books of geometry, one Shi Yang Xuan Shu, a Western-style calculations text made in the reign of left blank, and another much larger in 4 volumes, priced 10 taels. Printed during somebody's reign. Who's that? 83. Emperor Yongzheng's reign, which evidently was also European. There is a very old book on geometry called 84. Again, SATOW'S blank. Presumably he hoped to fill these in later. Well, yes, he did a lot of that. Which contains a proof of Euclid 1:47. And this is not Europe, but of their own discovery. I was not able to get what I wanted, and the large book was much too dear for me to buy. A little rain fell this evening, the first time for 6 months. May the 1st, Thursday. This day we began the new arrangement of breakfasting at 11 and dining at 7. Rain before breakfast prevented my going out to ride. After breakfast, as I was troubled with severe hoarseness, I did not have my teacher, though in future I shall have him from 12 till 3. In the afternoon, Stronach, Gardner, and I went out on horseback through the imperial city and by the marble bridge. The scene at the latter was very beautiful. The rain beginning to fall obliged us to come home as swift as possible. Just by the Tianmun, I wanted my horse to cross a small trench, beyond which was a heap of hewn stone. He refused, but Gardner's pony led the way. Then my horse planted his feet on the opposite side of the trench and took a standing jump right clear of the stones. There was an explosion with Milne today, who asserted that he was president of our mess and could order anything to be done that he liked, such as saying that we should have no more soup and sending the mess coolie away without consulting us. This matter was set at rest by Wade, who said all of us had an equal voice in the management, I think, of the mess affairs. Or regarding the management, perhaps. Friday, May the 2nd, before breakfast, went out for a ride through the Antingmun to the Russian cemetery where the victims of Chinese treachery, Brabazon, and the rest are buried. 86. Satow is referring to an incident during the Second Opium War. The deaths were a cause of the Anglo-French attack on Peking and the burning of the old summer palace. Okay. After copying the inscription, which reads, according to the footnote, sacred to the memory of Captain Brabazon, Royal Artillery, and so on, who were treacherously seized in violation of a flag of truce on the 18th of September, 1860, and sank under the inhuman treatment to which they were subjected by the Chinese government during their captivity. So after copying the inscription and adjusting our girths, we crossed the plain at a gallop to a crowd of Chinese, who Gardner at first pronounced to be holding a horse fair. It afterwards proved to be an assembly for practicing archery. The space was walled off by matting, inside which was a tent where the register was kept, but which Gardner's fertile imagination suggested was the place they were receiving prizes in. First, each man galloped along by the matting and fired an arrow at a mark stuck in the ground. When all had done this, they came inside the tent, and it was then that Gardner made the suggestion about prizes. But these men began to fire at a paper target with a red bullseye. Satow has drawn a little illustration, which was distant from them about 20 yards. If an archer missed, he retired at once, but if successful, was allowed a second shot. Among them were men of considerable rank and age. I think the 5th button was the highest there. Leaving this, we rode around the Lama temple, it is not permitted us to enter. Then followed a gallop across the plain in which nearly all jumped a ditch, almost up to the Antingmun. We then proceeded to the east and came upon the large stone which Stronach and I saw the other day. The ponies and mules, of which there were 800, were just preparing to start. We did not wait to see them do it, but went on round the walls to the Kee-tah-kew-shoo. My hoarseness was much better, but my cold in the head not. Walked with Gardner, Thompson, Jameson to the Liu Li Chung, where we tried to get some mathematical books, but did not succeed. We also went to a sweetmeat shop and eat as much as wanted, and then offered the man 4 tiaos, which he refused to take, and so we came away without paying aught. Anything. Paid nothing. Saturday, May the 3rd, my ride today was with Thompson in the afternoon. We went out at the Si Pien Mun and rode about in some very pretty country, extremely well wooded and covered with grass and green crops. Returned through the north of the west gates and home by the old route I took with Stronach. The Sun Che Mun Gate seems one of the finest in the Tartar city. In the evening, played whist at Jones's room, and I made some 14 points or so. Both the boy and coolie went out today without our leave, and we swore to kick out the coolie on his return. When he came back, it turned out that he is a Manchu and had gone out to exercise himself or to be drilled. Henceforth is to be mess coolie as well as our coolie, and half the burden of his wages is taken off our shoulders. Sunday, May the 4th, took a walk with Alan to the Curiosity Street to buy cash. A great many we got on the Beggar's Bridge at about 2 large cash apiece. At last the crowd grew so overpowering that we were obliged to cut it. In the evening went to Lockhart's and borrowed a book on perpetual motion machines and 2 Patriots, from which I am glad to see that 3 or 4 Mill Hill boys passed at the January matriculation. Heard today that student interpreters are privileged to have out from home once a quarter from Pacific, Peninsula and Oriental, a box not exceeding 56 pounds in weight nor 3 cubic feet in size. Yes, Satow is a Mill Hill boy himself, by the way. Monday, May the 5th. This morning, BT, Jameson, and I proceeded out alone, the centre one on a new horse just arrived from Tientsin. Directly we had got over the bridge at the north end of this street, Jameson and BT went off at a canter, which was speedily increased to a gallop, so they disappeared in a cloud of dust. Then they must needs gallop along Ha Tai Mun Street, and afterwards along the street leading to the Chi Hua Mun, through which we passed. So here are the footnotes for this page. Okay. And Jameson immediately began to trot along the causeway and over the bridge, then galloped off heaven knows where. Brown and I could not follow, so we rode along a side lane, and there we turned right to the right till we reached the water gate on the Tungchou Canal, at which place there is a fall of about 20 feet, and so to another gate. Can't read that. Is it Torbenmon in Japanese, I suppose, or Torbinmon in the Chinese wall, and thence home. I found a bath very refreshing after my ride. In the afternoon, Alan and I went to the Qianmen to buy cash, and in consequence were late for dinner, after which we held a whist meeting in Brown's room, who fed us with sweetmeats such as raisins and sugared walnuts and apples and pears. Among curious edibles which I have lately lighted upon was frog curry, which is in season the whole summer. It is by no means disgusting, but has rather too many bones. Tuesday, May the 6th, rain all day long, prevented any ride, played at fives instead. My teacher told me he must go to the Miao Feng Shan, where there is a temple celebrated for many cures having been effected at it, in order to burn joss stick and beseech to be relieved from his present illness. Wednesday, May 7th, before breakfast, took a ride to the altar to heaven in the Chinese city. We got in without any opposition and rode around the temple itself. The enclosure is planted thickly with all sorts of trees, except along the south wall, where there are several rows of trees running along parallel. Here was a splendid piece of grass, and we took full advantage of it. To the west of the altar is a bell tower. We ascended this and had a view of a farm with lots of cows close by. We could not see into the enclosure immediately surrounding the altar. The wall of it is coped with green glazed tiles. It is a capital place to catch butterflies and moths in. Afterwards, Gardner and I went to Qianmen and bought some old cash. I bought some capital fans, rather in R. Doyle's style, for 30 large cash each. Coming back, we fell into conversation with some Koreans who desired to see us at their legation, but time did not allow us to go. I offered to exchange hats with one of them, but he refused, nor would he sell it. Also invited them to come to my room to see some foreign coins. Today had another teacher with whom I played a game of xiang qi. Te xian sheng is his style. And there are the footnotes. Thursday, May the 8th, before breakfast, took Te Xin and my horse to the Temple of Earth to catch butterflies, caught Poliomatus alexus, a pair of small P. argiolus, Papilio argiolus, a small cabbage white, one like the female of the orange tip, and a large butterfly with tails. Besides this, I saw several other kinds. In the southern part of the enclosure is a low red wall, 4 square, and with a gate on the south side. Into this I entered and saw two enclosures of black glazed tiled walls, each of which had 4 portals. Inside of each is a platform, ascended by a flight of steps on each side, and altars of a single, 2, 3, or 4 cells each are ranged all around. On one platform were 2 bronze vases. The courtyard is chiefly paved and planted with huge pinasters and arbor vitae. All round outside the arbor vitae is also planted. North of this enclosure is a much longer enclosure with buildings in it, but I had not time to go in. The whole place is planted thickly with evergreen and other trees, and wheat goes wild almost everywhere. Among the flowers I noticed an iris, a bluish-purple crucifer, and a mauve composite flower. In the afternoon I went out with Gardner in search of a box for my insects, but could not find one cheap enough. At a curio shop I saw a game of chess to be played by 7 persons on a wei chi pan. The book of instructions was manuscript, and this makes me think that the game is not common. The man wanted $5 for it. Friday, May the 9th. BT, Alan, and I rode out today to the great Buddhist temple near the Anting Mun. Nearly all the priests were Tibetans dressed in yellow and red robes. Beside the older ones were lots of small boys, probably to be educated as priests. Very few understood Chinese. Their faces were totally different from the Chinese and very much resembled those of some Germans I have seen, with dark eyes. Some had light hazel. The great lion is a great gilt image of a female Buddha, said to be 72 Chinese feet high and cut out of a single tree. We ascended to the outside of the illegible building and had a good view of the city, east and west. Just north was the wall, and south other buildings of the temple. In the same house with the big image were innumerable little copper ones, and when I took one up, the priest said, "Don't," and took it from me, knocked his forehead slightly against it, and replaced. All except the big one had yellow silk shawls thrown round them. In another place were 4 great images before Buddha, two on each side of the mildest and most ferocious aspects possible. Besides these, a large figure by itself leading a horse. On the walls of this place were pieces of silk with Lama characters inscribed on them, and these were said to be prayers. I asked for one, but I could not get one. One way of saying prayers is to read them off a paper, beating a gong at the same time. A great way is to twirl a barrel around, inscribed with Tibetan characters and said to contain written prayers inside. One building had a lot of forms and cushions in it and a large piece of wood carving. The walls were hung with tapestry, or rather paintings on paper. Another had 3 or 4 large images of Buddha, before which were enamel vases of huge size to burn incense in and to hold artificial flowers. There were also 3 gilt models of temples, very well executed. This room was carpeted. Behind the images were 3 inscriptions on a wall in the form of Lama tombs. Okay, there's the 4 footnotes for this page. The Chinese foot, or chi, was slightly longer than a British or US foot. In front of the temple is a very long paved courtyard. Besides this, we visited a Confucian temple close by. The inner enclosure was formed by a great gateway, 2 walls, I think, and a large hall. Within this were the of Confucius in the center of the back wall. At a little distance, those of the 4 first-class disciples and of the second class. The way is a small platform of 3 or 4 steps, 2 high each, and the breadth 2 foot. On this is a perpendicular piece of wood on which is written something like this. And each of the disciples had something of the same sort, only substituted for. Everything was covered with dust to a most awful extent, and the showman said it was brushed off once a fortnight. Before the large hall in the courtyard were several votive tablets in houses. We came home by the east gate and had a gallop down, all among the carts, but without coming to any harm, luckily. I have to check their footnotes for all of those names or items. Saturday, May the 10th, in the afternoon, rode both to the Temple of Agriculture and the altar to heaven. We went all over the former, including the large enclosure into which I had not been before. It was divided by several walls and contained a bell tower like that in the altar to heaven, a raised platform with a facing of yellow tiles, supposed to be the place where the emperor does the ploughing, along with a large number of big bronze vases on it, and a great many buildings besides. Jones and Gardner started a fox here. After leaving this, we rode over the wall of the altar to heaven, where earth has been piled upon both sides, and galloped down the avenue, cantering back. We only took 35 minutes to do this and get back to the legation, a wonderfully quick ride. Played whist in Thompson's room and won 4 points on the whole. Received a box of wine, 1 dozen sherry from Lane and Crawford. That would be in London, I think. And a pair of long boots for riding. Sunday, May the 11th. Had intended to go to prayers, but was not ready in time. Spent the time between tiffin and breakfast in shooting at the little lions on the end of the Hanlin College's gable with Alan, and in looking over a lot of cash which his boy had brought for sale and wanted us to buy. I chose what I wanted and named my price. The boy declared that we could not possibly divide them, then became down to about 4.5 for each. Then came down, I suppose. So after tiffin, we took the boy with us and went to the shop. The man immediately agreed. After that, we got some more, for which we promised an old man a tiao if he would come to the legation. We passed out at the Hatamun and came in at the Tianmun, walking through a street full of inkstone, fan whip, and cutlery makers. The inks, fan whip, and cutlery makers at HTM end, other cutlery makers at Tianmun end, whip makers in the middle. Okay, so the Hanlin College or Academy, Hanlin Yuan, was an institution for scholars who worked at the court, founded in the 8th century and closed in 1911. HTM is the Hatamen gate. As an instance of cheek on the part of a Chinaman, my boy today took my umbrella out to Li Pai without asking my leave. I asked him why he took it, whereupon he replied that the day was hot. I then wished to know why he did not request me to lend it, and he said, "I won't do so tomorrow. I don't want your tomorrow. Why didn't you ask me?" I won't do so tomorrow. Don't say that word tomorrow. Why didn't you ask me? I don't know, was the reply. To which I answered, if you ever use my things again, I'll beat you and you shall leave the legation. As usual, we went to Lockhart's in the evening. Friday, May the 16th. Rode from the Tungpian Men along the wall to Anting Men and then burst across the plain to the Lama temple, which we entered. I riding straight through the gate while Jones and Allen cut off the men right and left who wanted to run and shut the door. In the middle was discovered a large Lama monument of white marble and covered with sculptures in basso relievo, the finest thing of the kind I have seen here. Then we took a gallop to the Teishen Men and came home by the lake. In the imperial city, coming round a corner, I ran my horse up against a barrier, luckily not doing very much damage. In the afternoon, Alan and I went to the LLC after cash. At the Chenmen, we stopped to look at some fans, and two Koreans came up and offered to change their cash for dollars, upon which we burst out laughing, and they imitated us rather rudely. At a shop in the LLC, we found some old cash, 6 in number, and offered 4 tiaos. The man would not agree, but I put them in my pocket. I took out the money, which of course he wanted to return. So I said that the cash were now mine and that I could not think of taking the money back as it did not belong to me. Then I quoted an edict of Kang Si, which I pretended said, 6 old cash are equal to 4 tiaos. When that would not do, I appealed to the crowd and said, that fellow is not a good man. He wants my money. He is a wicked man. An old man with a fan came into the shop and made signs and grimaces, like a Frenchman, that we should give 6 tiaos, and he stroked his chin to give greater weight to his words, or rather signs. At last I walked out of the shop, taking the 4 tiaos and giving back all but 1. This alarmed the shopman, and he let us have the cash at our own price. We went to the sweet shop at which Thompson, Jameson, Gardner, and I were before, without paying. Luckily, I was not recognized, but the old fellow asked Alan if he were one of the 4 who did not pay. Some fairly bad behavior here, I think. Saturday, May the 17th, Beatty, Allen, Jameson, Jones, and I went out at the Tungpian Mun and rode round the Chinese city. At the Tungpian Mun Men, Jones and I, separated from the rest, rode on to the next gate. I was on the wall side of the moat all the time and had some fine spurts. One was from the southwest gate to the west, a tremendous distance. My poor horse got awfully sweated. And now some footnotes. Okay. After entering the Tartar city, Jones and I rode round by the Marble Bridge and made an ineffectual attempt to get between the palace and the artificial mountain. I also tried to get into the pleasure grounds, but the doorkeeper was too quick for me. Then I had a long discussion, but it was of no use. Jones called them lunatics and I bad men, and so we went off. Besides this, we went into the grand building opposite, used for what purposes I do not know. Jones had some objection to our going all over it, and so we retired. It seemed a splendid building. Coming round one of the corners, I ran my horse's head against a barrier which the stupid Chinese had erected. Luckily, when I reached, I was not going at full speed, or else it would have been bad for both of us. Reached it, I suppose. Near the gate of the Tartar city, at which we entered, is a large Lama temple and a big Lama monument, illegible. Opposite the gate was one of those high dead walls of which one sees one before most Fuxiamen, and etc. Across here was a string which seemed to have had the effect of keeping all people from passing. I did not respect this, but lifted up the string to pass under, which action brought the whole thing down. So the people's something was of little account. However, they laughed and took it as a joke. Sunday, May 18th, the Bishop of Victoria, Hong Kong, preached. I did not, however, go to hear him, as I have been absent from Milne's preaching for many Sundays. After tiffin, Alan and I went out with the intention of proceeding to Sun Shi Men Ta Chi to look for cash, but the dust compelled us to turn back. So we went into a swell bookshop and asked for shoes, of which they had none. I then desired to look at boots. These were of satin with a leather sole, and the most uncomfortable I ever saw. Price 2.5 taels. Then we turned down the street leading to the open space where the Mongol market was held last winter, going in search of the astronomical and medical, etc. poo, which we could not find. So we entered in at a gateway close to the circus, with the intent of climbing over into that same and thereby shortening our walk. We walked through lots of places looking like sleeping and dwelling houses, all small and of the same size. They were evidently deserted, for all the paper was torn out of the windows. Getting over a wall, we found ourselves in a temple court, the one which was also deserted. In the first building I entered, I found one of the usual Buddha pictures covered with figures and painted on silk. This I seized. Lake broke the lock of a box, which I discovered to contain nothing but old clothes. There were several other halls. A footnote on George Smith, bishop from 1849 to 1865. Okay. And Pu Songling, best known for his strange stories from a Chinese studio. There were several other halls with wooden and plaster gods of all sizes, from 6 inches to 6 feet in height. The finest was locked up and bricks piled against the door, but we pulled down the bricks and wrenched out the staple. Here we found innumerable gilt goddesses of small size and several large ones. Of these, one enclosed in a horn case had 5 triple heads, one upon the other, gradually diminishing in size. Also, there was a deity riding on a peacock, which, but for the dust, would be perfectly gorgeous. I brought away 2 brass goddess, of 4 inches in height, and a wooden bronze of 5 inches, and a bronze one of the same size. Alan brought away 2. Getting over a wall, we found ourselves in Lockhart's place, and here Alan must needs pretend he had come to see Lockhart and was terribly sold to find he was not at home, as he said he would come in the evening. As if it was not easy enough, and clear too that we were trying to find a short way into the circus from the Mengku market. As if it was not easy enough and clear too that we were trying to find a short way into the circus from the Mengku market. In the evening at Lockhart's, the Reverend Mr. Burden preached, an army chaplain, who came up along with Bishop Smith. He is, I hear, to stay here as chaplain. Robertson, a Japanese student interpreter of more than 1 year standing, arrived here a few days ago to stop for the same foolish, idiotic, waste-timeful purpose that Jameson and I are here. Nevertheless, I am glad to be here for the present. Monday, May the 19th. 8 of us rode out together this afternoon, 4 going by the Tungpian men and 4 other ways, and we met on the plain before the Lama temple and had sundry gallops. Gardner and I went into a Buddhist temple east of that which we had entered last Friday. We did not dismount, having no cash, but the seeming chief Bonzu asked me to eat and drink. After we had all met, we went over the plain to the east at a pretty fast canter and passed through the old wall, which is a great mound of earth, some 2 miles from the city at that point. I believe that remains of this are to be found all round the city. The ancient bastions are still very well defined. When we got back to dinner, we found that our god-stealing was discovered. The coolie in charge had asked for them, knowing for certain that 2 student interpreters had taken them. It seems that it is not a deserted temple, but the family joss house of the Duke Liang. At first the man asked for 4 only, then, when these were given up, for 2 others, and then for 3 more and a picture. And lastly declared that we had stolen a pair of his filthy, lousy, stinking trousers. Now, in fact, we had 6 in all, and a picture of these were all given up. These were all given up. Yet Milne must needs believe that someone had more, and talk in a most aggravating and foolish way of compensation. I don't care a fig if there is IOU when Bruce and Wade come back. Milne evidently wants to make one if he can. After dinner, went to tea in the legation drawing room with Bishop Smith. The dreariness of the conversation. He asked me to bring him my butterflies to show him. The idea, when there are only 3 or 4. The only advantage gained was permission to take some of the novels away. Tuesday, May 20th. This afternoon, 8 of us rode to the Confucian Temple, the Temple of the Classics, and the Great Lama Temple. The way we cantered round the corners was a caution. Before we got to the Anting men, we caused 3 accidents. First, we started a mule who ran off, overturned the cart to which it was harnessed, and made a smash. Immediately after, Jones ran into a man carrying 2 baskets of crockery, of which he smashed a lot. The third accident was the taking of a tucky off his donkey with the foot, whereby he lay grovelling in the dust while his steed ran off. We visited first the Confucian Temple and there the Temple of the Classics. This consists of a square lined with sheds in which are placed black stones with the classics engraved on them. These sheds extend along the east and west walls, and I think on the north and south, except where are doors. To the south is a triple arch of white marble with very beautiful carvings of flowers. It is capped by green and yellow glazed tiles and a most useful invention, truly. In the southwest corner, in a bell tower, and in the other angles, other 3 towers, containing 2 memorial tablets and a bell, but I don't know which is which. In the center of the space is a square building where the emperor goes once in 10 years to expound the classics. The outside is very good, and of course the tiles are glazed yellow. In fact, the walls are nothing but a network of wooden doors blocked up inside, which latter we did not see, as the door could not be unlocked. This building stands in the midst of a circular dry pond. Thus, the black ink mark indicates a marble balustrade with lions' heads at the usual distance. The 4 bridges are paved with splendid slabs of marble perfectly joined together. There's the footnotes. We then went to the Lama temple, where the great image of Buddha is. We arrived just as the bell was being rung for afternoon prayers. The way it is sounded is by swinging a log of wood against the outside. There was a regular procession of them in yellow gowns and with large caps, like huge yellow Scotch caps, crowned by a ridge extending down the back. We rode right in to the very house but one in which is Pho, but turning back, as of course the lamas, who greatly opposed our coming, would certainly not hold the horses. They told us only the emperor could come in riding, whereupon Brown said we were all foreign emperors. Some very significantly drew their hands across their throats. So we took the horses to the top of the long courtyard, where Gardner remained to look after the horses. We saw the same as before. I tried not to get the old bonze to sell me a brass god, but he would not, and seemed horribly frightened. At one of the side temples was a jolly brass model of some temple, but certainly of none there. I got a set of prayers given to me here. We heard and saw the men and boys who had formed the procession performing service, which seemed to consist in a continued musical growl. After passing through the Unting men, some of the student interpreters started off a lot of camels and pursued them to the northwest corner of the plain, where Beatty's stirrups came to pieces, and he was delayed so long that we began to fear lest Jameson and he were lost or thrown. At last they appeared, and we came home by the lake and through the imperial city. Yesterday, outside the Unting men, I saw 2 men who had been fighting with knives, and one of them presented a more horrid appearance than any I have ever seen. It was covered with blood and cuts. So the Chinese do fight to some purpose when their blood is up. The Temple of Earth. Wednesday, May the 21st. Jones and I rode half round the Chinese city, going out at the Sipian men and coming back by the Tung Nan men, as it then began to rain. We saw an immense number of people washing radishes in the stream at the foot of the walls in large quantities, and a great many must be consumed here in proportion to other foods. Jones told me what I did not know before, that the Chinese class at King's College used to have a monopoly of these student interpreter appointments, and therefore they were very savage at nominations before being given away to others. Though 6 went in, only 2 succeeded. Thursday, May the 22nd, went out at 8 o'clock to the Xian Nung Tan to catch butterflies. I got 2 moths, 4 butterflies with white wings, marked with light black blotches above and green beneath, and 2 of the large heath butterfly, Cononympha pamphilus. SATOW'S ? After tiffin, I went down Korea Street and sat for some time in a ginseng shop, talking to the shopkeepers, who are not Koreans but Chinese. This herb is 20 taels per kati, or 3/4 of its weight in silver. In another shop, I saw Korean paper in large sheets, which is generally used for windows, but will also do very well for copying maps and so on. Korean cloth is sold in lengths about 13 inches wide and is coarser than American illegible. Friday, May 23rd. This afternoon, Alan, Brown, Robertson, and I rode to Palichuan from the Ping Se men. And after some riding, soon found ourselves there. It is a small walled town with 2 gates, one at the east, one at the west. The walls north and south seem to have fallen away. The place is 3 miles in a direct line, a little south from Xichemen. The great feature of this place is a closed pagoda, 270 Chinese foot higher, rather doubtful, with 13 stories of small height above the basement, which looks about 50 or 60 English feet to the ground, from the ground. The basement tower is covered with the finest sculptures and in the best preservation that I have ever seen in a building of its age. Well, it was erected during the Ming dynasty. From the eaves of each story hang lots of little bells. We were very particular in asking if there was a passage underground, but the priest said it was a dead pagoda, which means, of course, that Jofuho? What's that? As they express it. The foundation is octagonal and is approached by steep inclines from the ground. At the four corners are small temples of Buddha of no account, and the same applies to the small temple just north of the pagoda on the other side of the court. After leaving Palichuan, we went a little south and then east, passing through a very beautiful country. We skirted a lot of mounds, which are the boundaries of an extinct artificial lake made to prevent the country from being overflowed in ancient times, when there was more rain than there is now. Came in at the Sipian-men. Lockhart tells me that there is a good ride to Lu Ko-Chiao out of the west gate of Chinese City, going a little south of west 9 miles. Southwest? Another from the, or south of west, I see. Another from the Sipian-men going due west to the Shiking-shan, about the same distance. Also, there is a good ride to a French cemetery north of Palichuan. Saturday, May 24th, at about 12 a.m., fired a salute, sang God Save the Queen, and gave 3 cheers for Her Majesty, Queen Victoria, that is, whereby we astonished the natives pretty considerably. I asked my teacher to write something of his own composing on a fan, which compliment delighted him hugely. Rode with Gardner from the Ping-che-men to the Yue-tan, between the palace and the Qingshan. Directly the doorkeeper saw us coming, he shut the gate, but somehow did not lock it, and so we cantered through. The Yue-tan is entered either from the causeway on the west of the city or by a long street running down from Ping-che-men-ta-chi. Inside is a large paved space overgrown with flowers and with a building here and there of no account. The men in charge came running after us and asking for money, also said a lot about Kung Wang He, which we did not understand. However, as there was naught to see, we went out. Then riding south, we passed some remarkable tombs near the Si-pen-men. They are built of brick, 8-sided and about 8 or 10 feet high, much in the style of some city pumps, and have yellow or green buttons on the top, bell-shaped. Next, we went to a pagoda 10 feet higher than that at Palichuan, and also covered with sculptures, which seem to me to have been made of plaster covered with paper. They do not come up to those of the other pagoda, which it resembles and here are some footnotes, in being without means of ascent. In a building south of this is an image of Buddha, which I calculated to be 30 foot high. The priest said 36 Chinese feet, but that is an exaggeration, I think. In the evening, we had Milne, Lockhart, and St. John to dinner. Afterwards, some Chinese fireworks provided by the first and third. The fire pots were very good. Unluckily, a spark set fire to some, which were on a table, and lots went off together, rather confusedly, but looking very well. The last contained 3 sets of paper lanterns, of which the second and third dropped down as soon as fireworks 1 and 2 went out. The lanterns themselves did not burn, but were illuminated by a slow-burning white light. The thing was suspended from the top of 3 poles tied together, forming a tripod. Teishin told me that he had seen a huli, or fox, and then proceeded to say that this beast was devil and could change itself into a man or a woman, that a friend of his living near the Ping-che-men had known an old man who possessed one of these. He then spoke of devils and said that Chinese devils had flesh and blood, and of this sort was the tall one who took up Murray's gun and fired off at night. I told him that it was all nonsense, and he said he did not believe these things. My teacher says that formerly a car driver in the employ of a legation once beat a man so that his life was despaired of, whereupon Wade put up a notice to the effect that all servants in our employ, if they acted improperly, abusing or beating the people, should be handed over to their own authorities. I have great doubts whether the aforesaid flowery race can read the proclamation, for one man I asked did not understand it. Sunday, May the 25th. Read Adam Bede. After tiffin, Alan and I went out for cash and got a lot of Ming and Sung. Yuan dynasty seemed to be awfully scarce. I bought a little sundial with compass attached, useful in any latitude for 4 tiao, and a bird's food pan for one. On the wall we were stuck with the plump and sturdy appearance of some children who said they had nothing to eat. It appears that Chinese dying of starvation are given to getting fat. A man not long ago died in the hovel on the wall by the Qian men, and he was in seemingly very good condition. Went to Lockhart's in the evening and was much struck with a sermon on self-sacrifice which he read. It strikes me that I ought not to be spending and saving all I get for myself, but should give a tithe away, so I will send to the German hospital. That would be the German hospital in Dalston. His father was one of the governors, I think. All right, so here are the footnotes. Moving on. Monday, May the 26th, rode again to Palichuan from the Sipian men through the bed of an extinct lake. The outlet was formerly closed by sluices which still remain. Close by them is a tower for fishing. The lake has been dry for perhaps 50 years and is now planted round the edges with barley. In the middle is either millet or rushes. The place contrasts strikingly with the land just outside the enclosing mounds, being about 10 times as fertile. The mile or so of green was very refreshing to the eye. Beyond Palichuan, about a quarter of a mile from the west gate, is a large cemetery with very fine tombs. Some are upright slabs, others horizontal, just like some of ours at home, bearing on them 5 pieces of stone cut somewhat in the shape of flower vases. The trees were hoary pines, pinasters, lignum vitae, and others just as fit for such a place. In coming back, I got separated from the others. Going over the marble bridge, I made a rush and got through between the palace, which makes the 3rd time I have passed there. That's 158. That's Jingshang or Prospect Hill. Thursday, May 29th. Jameson, Thompson and I went to the Temple of Heaven. The door of the inner enclosure marked H was on the latch, and we entered in spite of the gatekeeper's remonstrances. A paved causeway runs from this across a grassy level to the opposite gate. We left this and passing B, the place where the emperor stops when he comes to sacrifice, entered the grove of pine and lignum vitae surrounding the altar marked A. This consists of a mound divided into 3 terraces, as in the figure 2. A paved with white marble and with marble balustrades. This presents a very beautiful appearance. The building A, as well as the surrounding ones marked with 3 small A's, have deep blue glazed tile roofs. The building C is of the same construction but appears rather smaller. We could not get into it as there was no key. D is another white marble mound with a plain top on which the throne of the emperor is erected. I saw 5 carved white marble tables about 3.5 feet high and from 12 to 18 inches in diameter. They were circular below the mound. South SE is a green erection containing a furnace. East of this are 8 iron baskets, 1 for each emperor. What the use is, I don't know. Plenty of blocks for tying horses are scattered about. K contains buildings in which the utensils and so forth are kept. These we did not see. J is now levelled with the ground, and only the site remains to attest its former existence. E, partly in ruins, contains dwelling houses. F is a sort of farm, where probably the sacrificial cattle are reared. G is a bell tower of 2 stories to be ascended by a staircase in the wall. When we came to make our exit, we found that the man outside, to make sure of us, had locked the door. Hereupon we set into a shout, and the fellow unlocked it and let us out. He asked for chien, but got none. I think this all refers to some kind of diagram. Let me just have a quick check. No, there is nothing near in this text. So, Friday, May the 30th. This morning, Wade called us all together and said that Wen Xiang, the head of the Foreign Office, had sent to him, and in consequence of that, Wade called on him and learned that one of us had gone to the temple where the idol of medicine is and had tried to buy it. Failing in that, he sat on the shrine and made his servant kowtow to him. That as the person accused spoke Chinese, it was impossible that it should have been anyone but a student interpreter. Mr. Brice was severely disgusted, but would not inquire into the matter, for if it were discovered, the guilty person must be sent to a port, and that if in future student interpreters gave offence to Chinamen, the offenders would be suspended, awaiting the approval of the Foreign Office if the case were grave. If not important but still bad, that or those student interpreters would go down to the ports and take their chance in the service. Continued acts of this kind would cause the whole establishment of student interpreters at Peking to be broken up. Wade also spoke of our walking into the Temple of Heaven and breaking in, that we have no right to go in, except we give a gratuity, and then it depends on their willingness to open the door, which speech we commented on by going into that temple over the wall the same afternoon, so they didn't care at all what Wade said to them. May 31st. Saturday, May 31st. Before breakfast, Alan and I went to the Tien Tan to get birds' eggs and butterflies, but did not meet with very bright success. We got into the enclosure by the door marked K, north of the altar to the vault of heaven. Lockhart says that the sacrifices offered are dead sheep and cattle. Coming back, we saw my teacher, who was going to meet his, to present him with fruit, that being the custom now. June the 1st, Sunday, went out as usual after cash, but did not find any. Read part of The Heart of Midlothian, a Walter Scott novel. On 2nd of June, Monday, Thompson, B.T. Jameson, Alan and I went to Yen, sending a cart before with provisions for ourselves and the horses. We took tiffin on top of the grotto. After tiffin, as we were cooling ourselves in the grotto, the Chinese came to say that the horses had broken loose. When we got there, we found Alan's horse and mine engaged in a fight with another and with Jameson's on account of smelling some dung of Jameson's horse. Mine got bitten on the back and neck, besides a few cuts, had several kicks. Luckily, the damage done is not great. It appears that the Tokis had unloosed Alan's and that mine had broken the rope by which he was bound to the tree. We went to the hill opposite the island. At the entrance to the park, we were compelled to dismount and tie up our horses. Before the gateway are 2 bronze lions in sitting posture, 8 foot in height on stone or marble pedestals from 3 to 4 feet in height. Inside was a wonderful scene of demolition. All the houses had been destroyed by fire, the statues and vases of carved marble smashed. Note 166. Satow was surveying the destruction wrought 2 years earlier by British and French troops. I noticed several peculiar pieces of honeycombed rock which stood upon sculptured bases. These were very slighted, sick, injured, slightly injured, I suppose. A paved walk shaded with trees runs along by the side of the lake. When we arrived at the staircase, we prepared to ascend. First, we had to cross the ruins of temple in which 2 huge bronze deities had occupied the center, with 6 inferior ones on each side. The balustrades of the double flights of stairs were of green and yellow glazed bricks. Some were entire, others entirely smashed. The stairs are arranged thus. Satow has drawn a shape, and there are 2 of these. Above, a flight of steps cut in the rock leads to the house, which is covered with yellow tiles of very deep color, in the center of each, there being a green image. The house has 2 stories. On the east side of this is a house built by the Jesuits after a common villa pattern, with 2 3-sided bows and 2 stories. On the north declivity of the hill, there had been a large number of buildings, several of which were joss houses. After descending and walking a huge distance among the trees, we got back to the door and hence home all safe. It was easy to see that Alan's horse had not forgotten his fight with mine, for he always neighed and struck out when we got together. Tuesday, June the 3rd, took Jamieson's horse and went out with Robertson, Murray and Gardner. Murray on a pony, Milne bought for $18, but nevertheless a good one to go. Jamieson's horse is a jolly one to ride on, so strong and so willing to go. We went down to the Haizu, an imperial hunting park, Haizu, usually known as the Nanyuan hunting park. And at the bridge atop of the plain in the Chinese city was a huge crowd caused by the holidays and the horse fair. At this time, but particularly on the 5th of the Chinese month, people meet together to arrange and discharge their debts and afterwards have a jollification. This was why our teachers were absent on Monday. The crowd set up a huge roar and we rode among them, but that did not stop it. Not far from the Haizu, Murray chased a man across the road, back again and up a lane onto a bank for making this diabolical noise. We tried to get into the hunting ground, but could not induce the people to open the door. Then we went east and north and came to some large brick kilns. A winding path led to the top about 50 feet above the ground. The interior was slightly funnel-shaped, and there was a depression on the floor on one side for the fire, which is introduced from outside, that is. About a dozen kilns are collected in 3 lots, but one lot is entirely ruined. The walls at the top of earth cased with bricks are at least 6 feet thick. The kilns we ascended seemed to be in good working order, and there were piles of new bricks and tiles lying about. Thunder, sheet lightning, and rain during the night. My letters came in, and among them a certificate from Medhurst that I have been paid $150, and I hope now to get my arrears amounting to $260.40. Wednesday, June the 4th, stayed at home. Thunder and rain again in the evening, and sheet lightning of great vividness. Sent my boy out for honey at 11 pence a pound and found it good. Thursday, June the 5th, went to the Yue Tan on horseback to catch butterflies. My horse was rather restive, not having been out since Monday. When I got inside the first courtyard, the doorkeepers came running to say that I must dismount. I did so and tied my horse up to a tree. After I had caught 1 or 2 clouded yellows, the butterflies, a man came running and shouted, "Wailo," and talked a lot of stuff about Prince Kung, which I disregarded until I had filled my box. I caught 6 clouded yellows, 2 kinds of coppers, a painted lady, and some others. When I had finished, I listened to the man, and he said that in future I should not be able to come in without an order from Prince Kung. So I agreed to get an order, and he accepted the cash which I offered. Going to mount my horse, I found that he had broken his girths, and so I had to walk home an hour and a half with the bridle over my arm. Twice I dropped the pad, and once it was picked up by some boys who ran a huge distance with it, and doubtless expected some cash. Unfortunately, I had none, having given all away at the Yue Tan. Friday, June the 6th, rode down to the Nanting Miao, close to the Haitsu, where a fair is being held. We saw a juggler who took 3 bowls in each hand, 1 under each arm and some in his mouth, and then made a somerset backwards over the top of a table. That's a somersault. Next, he took a basket in his hands containing 5 bowls, 4 with a 5th upon them, and turned head over heels. After that, he and some small boys turned lots of somersets without stopping. He did 10 or 12 at least. I gave a few cash and promised a tiao if he would play with the bear. All sorts of fruit and sweetmeat were being sold, and long bamboos or millet stalks with windmills and animals whose tails went round by the wind. We came back to the Yungting Men by a side lane and then along the wall. I was taken so bad with hiccups consequent on eating my tiffin too quickly that I was obliged to drop behind and walk on slowly, late for dinner in consequence. Finished the testimony of the rocks. Saturday, June the 7th, went cash hunting. All the people in Curio Street seemed to know me as the old cash merchant. Sunday, June the 8th, Mail went out today, wrote to the governor, his father, asking for Morrison's dictionary and Dutch books, also quinine and Seidlitz powders. Gave a list of poetry I should like. Sent to J.S. Robison a parcel ticket of the P&O. Monday, June the 9th, had a very bad feverish headache, accompanied with pains in the back, so that I could do naught all day but go to sleep. Tuesday, June the 10th, headache and pain in the back seemed to have passed off by the evening. Much thunder lightning these days. Wednesday, June the 11th, Alan and I went about 7:30, as it had rained a good deal the night before. First, we went into the Hanlin Yuan. It is not a particularly fine building, the houses being rather dilapidated. The exam hall was not open to view. Next, into the enclosure where the emperor's chariots are kept. I looked in at one place and saw some red carts under cover. The doors were not openable, and the windows of the other buildings too high to look in. Crossing the road, we went into the enclosure in front of the gate of the palace called the Cheng Yi Men. We then went out of the Chien Men and tried to discover the goldfish pond north of the Tien Tan, but after going through the most stinking and filthy places, we missed them and came to a temple where a sort of small fair was going on. Opposite this were men selling the following plants: hollyhocks, roses, pinks, sweet williams, pansies, china asters, nasturtium, blue cornflower, and I believe other 4 flowers. A good deal of rain fell during the day and made it cool enough to play 5s. Milne says Bruce has half promised to get us admittance into the Yue Town when we like. Thursday, June the 12th, got up a little after 4 to go out to ride, issued from the legation gates about 5. We were 6 in number. Jones made such a row, calling us, that he woke everyone in the quad, and Milne declared he would report him to Wade next time. Rained a great deal today. Shot a hoopoe which was sitting on the top of Milne's house. The bullet struck it on the wing and broke it, shot away one of its legs and made a huge hole in the guts, passing out on the other side. The bird flew down to the passage between Murray's house and the wall. There I caught it and had to fire through it again to kill it. I took off the uninjured wing and made an attempt with the head feathers, but failed. Much rain this evening. Friday, June the 13th. In consequence of the rain, went not out to ride. Walked to the Liu Li Chang for books and found the mud something awful. Some places were flooded and the Qianmen was almost impassable. Got some pictures to send home to the girls, his sisters, I think. Also bought a book of quarto size, very thin, containing full and complete illustrations of agriculture. The word wheat is written above agriculture. And the cultivation of the silkworm, a book published under the emperor's auspices. The mud was so great that I rode back. Saturday, June the 14th, rode out in the afternoon and found it awfully muddy in some places. The road was quite flooded. Passing by a pond where 2 or 3 youngsters were playing, they got so frightened that one ran and fell right into the pond. Sunday, June the 15th, finished The Bride of Lammermuir, that's a Walter Scott novel, and I'm through 1 volume of Hooke's Chinese Empire. About 4 o'clock, sent my boy to change $1 and made several calls to try whether he had come back or not. At last, after the lapse of more than an hour, he came up, and when I asked for the change, he replied that he had not been out, but had been Xia, whereupon I kicked him out, having put on my shoes for the purpose. He rushed away, slamming the door, and presently came back with the most lugubrious visage possible, laid the $1 down, and said something about not being kicked, to which I answered, "If you do not do my business, I shall beat you," and turned him out to go and change the money, which he did. He afterwards told Jameson that he could no longer be my servant on account of kicking. Whether he goes or not, I don't much care, but the incident illustrates the Chinese feelings. The prevailing fruits are cherries and apricots, the latter of all sizes from that of a damson to the size we get in England. Large size 2 cash each, small ditto 6 for a cash. The cherries are very small and bad. Thursday, June the 19th, played cricket at the Tiantan before breakfast and 5s after tiffin. At breakfast, Jameson did something to Beatty which caused him to seize the former by the throat as if he would strangle him, whereupon ensued a short scuffle in which Jameson got the worst of it. Had I been he, I would have punched Beatty's head, but he contented himself with abusing him as much as he could. Saturday, June the 21st, got up early and rode to the Li Tan outside the Chihua Men. The approach to it is by a long court with high walls on each side and overgrown with weeds and grass to such an extent that my house did not appear above the herbage. On reaching the bottom, I turned to the left and found myself in a large walled space of about an acre in extent. On my right was a way leading out into the road, and a little farther on the same side, the entrance to the temple. After trying a gate west of the enclosure, I went to that which I had first seen, and finding it unlatched, walked in. On my left was a great bell tower, which commands fine views all round, except on the east, where some houses are in the way. What they contained I was not curious enough to investigate. The wall of the enclosure surrounding the altar is round, the altar itself square, with a bronze vessel on each corner. West of the gate by which I entered is another clump of houses with a wall round them. This I did, and then you have the footnotes. This I did not enter. As the old man said, there was nothing. The rest of the place is overgrown with weeds, except a small plot where the old man cultivates some kind of corn. From that place I went in search of the Tungyu Miao and got into one place which seemed to be a sort of Alsatia, for certainly the people were greater blackguards than I had seen anywhere. After getting into another, I was directed to the place I was looking for. It is close to the Triumphal Arch on the left hand on the road leading to Tungchou. To begin the description, OO and large roof gates, OOO small side doors. For the rest, see page 87. The eaves of the roofs were very well painted and covered with netting to keep out the swallows. Inside the best temple are decorations of artificial flowers. The tombstones in the courtyard were as fine as they generally are. In some of the side temples, the figures are most horrible, such as a man bound to a post, just ready to be beheaded by the figure standing next. And others had the faces of beasts and devils. I had great trouble in getting my horse out of that place, as he was frightened at the 3 or 4 steps he had to descend. There's the Tungyu Miao. sketch by Satow from his diary. So yes, there's a footnote about Alsatia, an area of London, which was a refuge for criminals, and so on. I think I'm going to stop here because this is already pretty long. So I will stop the share and I will start again later. Thank you.